and I've made my home here in Merri-bek. I love our progressive, creative and diverse community. There's so many great places to visit. There's always something new to learn, something new to see, or something to do. In 2018, our council declared a climate emergency. The reality is that the climate crisis demands we reshape our cities to deal with the impacts of rising heat and more extreme weather events like flooding. But there's also opportunity. Imagine if we use this chance to make our streets greener, cooler and more livable and safe for everyone to get around in, no matter if you're walking, riding or driving. There's a lot of work for us to do together and I'm really excited about the next 12 months. So please get in touch with your ideas and I look forward to meeting you out in our community. Got it? Good.
Open Streets trials are initiatives to open the streets to people walking, riding, scooting and close the streets to car traffic just to drop off and pick up times. We know that a lot of schools in Merri-bek really struggle with congestion. We also know that a lot of families want to walk or ride to school, but the dangerous zones outside the school gates often push people away from making that choice. So it's really about just creating a really hyper-safe, sustainable, healthy space in front of schools.
It's been absolutely brilliant. The kids are loving coming to school on Tuesdays. There's a real vibe and a sense of, joy when we start the day together. Lots of families are starting to come back. Our student attendance has increased on the days that we have open streets, and also we have less lateness as well. So it's just been brilliant all around.
We don't normally walk, we normally drive, so it's a really good incentive to get parents that don't normally do it, doing it. Once we're out and walking, they really enjoy it. It's so much safer. The kids love coming in here, playing, drawing on with chalk.
This has been probably the highlight. Parents are saying, wow, can we do this more often, which has been fantastic. To see the joy on the kids' faces and to hear them saying, wanting to ride their bikes and wanting to have a play on the street's been amazing.
We have a huge percentage of our students riding to school. You can just see how successful it is. We've got kids riding, parents coming along, just really enjoying themselves. And it's changed my thinking. For someone who drove to work, bought my own bike and riding to work each day, it's amazing.
It's a fun experience. I normally walk, but today everyone's doing it, so I might as well join in.
It's also an initiative that residents and the local community can take part in. We want to see people coming out, having a coffee, we want to see people talking to their neighbours, and it's been really fantastic to partner with Bicycle Network and the schools to run these initiatives and really see some healthy, happy street space.
Being part of Open Streets has been really exciting. We're interested in making people view their neighbourhood streets in a different way, being spaces for everyone and multi-use spaces, not just for throughways for cars.
And just listen to all this noise. It's great having everyone have so much fun around you and just being active. No, we're really stoked. We should happen every day.
This is very attractive for parents and kids to spend together. I think it's encouraging people to ride to the school.
I think it's definitely a good idea to get people active and getting people involved with the community. Because of this, it got a lot of me and my friends to ride to school every day. I get to see all my friends and talk to new people.
I'm Maya, and I've been really into boxing and I do a lot of art in my spare time, and I'm also a disability support worker. I was officially diagnosed with chronic fatigue probably about 2 years ago. I have a specialist doctor and I was telling him I really need a label for this. And the reason he said that he didn't want to give me the label sooner was because he knew how it was perceived in the medical field as like being a bit of a joke, and that it actually is more detrimental to me to have the label than not to have it. And it's better to go to the doctors saying that you have adrenal fatigue or something a little bit fancier just to be taken a little bit more seriously. It's hard to have this sort of condition because everyone knows what fatigue is like, so everyone can jump in and sort of add their anecdotes, and I think it takes away from what it really is like. When people show a genuine interest and it's not sort of clouded by their own experience or I know what it's like being tired all the time, it's actually just really helped when people are like, what is that actually like? That gives me the opportunity to be like, it's so much more than people think. It's not just being tired throughout the day or needing a coffee. It's, you know, having 10 hours of full sleep and not being rested. It's not being able to get up in the morning. It's being late to shifts because you just can't move your body. You know, it's really hard to be 22 with a chronic condition that makes me feel like the energy of an 80-year-old, or having to come home at 10 o'clock at night when it's a Saturday night, you know, that sort of thing. So I think it just really helps when people ask questions, because it makes me feel seen. It makes me feel like people are actually interested, instead of making the assumption that, oh, I know what it's like, I can deal with it, why can't she? People with disabilities, they have so much to bring to the table, but I guess the table isn't always accessible to them, so to speak. I guess that's like the most important thing, is to give them a platform, especially, you know, working with disabled people and advocating for them. You realise like how hard it is for them to even have that voice.
Good evening, councillors, members of the gallery, and to our viewers live. Can you hear me out there in the gallery? No. Okay, we won't get started just then. Thank you for letting me know. All right, so can you let them know that gallery can't hear us? Just let me, you can hear us now. Great. Okay, perfect. We're good to go. Thank you. Good evening, councillors, members of the gallery, and to our viewers live streaming tonight's meeting. My name is Councillor Adam Pulford, and I'm the Mayor of Merri-bek City Council and the chairperson for tonight's council meeting for planning and related matters. It's my pleasure to welcome you to tonight's meeting. We're meeting on the lands of the Wurundjeri Woi-wurrung people. We wish to acknowledge them as the traditional custodians of these lands and waterways, and would also like to pay our respects to their elders past and present, as well as to all First Nations communities who significantly contribute to the life of this city. This council meeting is being recorded and web streamed live to council's website and Facebook. This recording will also be available as video on demand. Gallery attendees are advised that they will be recorded during the meeting. A reminder that as councillors, we will act in accordance with the Councillor Code of Conduct, which will support the principles of leadership and good governance that secures public confidence in the office of councillor. In the event of an emergency or disruption, we may be required to take action to ensure the safety of attendees. For members of the gallery and councillors attending in person, please follow the directions issued by council staff and security officers. Thank you for your understanding and cooperation. So tonight, I'd like to introduce the other councillors in attendance in person. We have Councillor James Conlon.
Hi, everyone.
We have Councillor Mark Riley.
Good evening.
Councillor Sue Bolton. And Councillor Monica Hart. Online, we have Councillor Angelica Panopoulos.
Good evening.
And Councillor Helen Pavlidis.
Good evening.
I also would like to introduce Philip Priest, the Group Manager of City Development, and we have members of the Urban Planning team and other council staff here this evening. Item 2 is apologies. Councillor Yildiz is currently on an approved leave of absence. Apologies for tonight's meeting have been received from Councillors Carly Hannon, Davidson, and Councillors Davidson, and I suspect Councillor Tapanos, the Deputy Mayor, will also be an apology this evening. He's let us know that it's likely he will be. Are there any other apologies? I think all other councillors are accounted for. I will now move on to disclosures of conflicts of interest. Councillors, are there any conflicts of interest to declare? Great. Okay. Item 4, confirmation of minutes of previous meetings. Councillors, could I please have a motion for the confirmation of the minutes of the council meeting for planning and related matters held on the 22nd of November 2023? Councillor Panopoulos, do I have a seconder? Councillor Riley. All those in favour? All those against? I declare that carried.
Just as I was out of the room, I don't have any conflicts of interest to declare.
Okay, great.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councillor Riley. Before we move on to the reports for consideration, I'll outline how this council meeting for planning and related matters will run. For the item in relation to a planning permit application, the relevant planner will introduce the report and officer's recommendations. I will then give objectors the opportunity to make their submission. After this time, the applicant will be given the opportunity to speak. If you are making a submission, please clearly state your name for the record. You are requested to present viewpoints clearly and concisely on why you support or oppose the planning application. Please don't repeat what earlier speakers have said and keep the discussion focused on relevant issues and points not previously raised. If you're opposed to the planning application, please inform the meeting why you're opposed and suggest an alternative approach which would satisfy your concerns. Please use this opportunity to focus on your concerns rather than matters of detail in the officer's report. And please note that there is a limit of 3 minutes for each objector and the permit applicant, but as chairperson, I reserve the right to increase or reduce the time available to any speaker. Finally, tonight we have 7 councillors present and our quorum requires 6 councillors. It's in everybody's interest that a decision is reached tonight, and with the risk that we could lose quorum, I'll be reminding people to stick to their speaking time. We do have a lot of people that wish to speak this evening. Moving on to item number 5, the presentation of reports. We have 2 reports this evening. The first report is 5.1, 11 to 17 Colebrook Street, Brunswick, Planning Permit Application MPS 2023-316. Does any councillor have a conflict of interest to disclose? I will move to Alex Osborne, Principal Urban Planner, to present the report.
Thanks, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. This is a planning application at 11 to 17 Colebrook Street, Brunswick, for the use of land as a place of assembly, live music and entertainment venue, buildings and works, display of electronic signage, reduce the number of car parking spaces, use of land to sell and consume liquor, and removal of a crossover in the heritage overlay. The application is at decision stage. The site is located on the western side of Colebrook Street, roughly 300 metres south of Moreland Road. It is occupied by a former Melville's grain store building, which is on the Victorian Heritage Register. East of the site is the Upfield train line. South of the site are the additional former Melville's grain store buildings used for residential and warehouse purposes. West of the site is a laneway followed by residential properties, and north of the site are a mix of commercial and industrial properties. These images are taken to the rear of the site. These are the laneways. Planning controls, we're in the Industrial 3 zone, the Development Contributions Plan overlay and the Heritage overlay. The proposal is for use of land as live music and entertainment venue and to sell and consume liquor. This includes a maximum of 875 patrons, operating hours of 6 p.m. to 1 a.m. 7 days a week. Buildings and works include the internal fit-out and external alterations, the display of electronic promotional signage on either side of the entry doors, reduce the statutory car parking requirement to 0, and removal of the crossover. In terms of public notice, 87 objections were received and 46 supporting statements. Issues and objections included noise, patron behaviour and management, car parking and use of the laneway. Issues raised in the supporting statements included support of live music, adaptive reuse of a heritage building, proximity to public transport in the activity centre and economic development. A planning information and discussion meeting was held on the 21st of November 2023 and was attended by 35 objectors and 1 supporter. The key considerations include reuse of a state significant heritage building, support for live music, investment in jobs in the core industry and employment area, noise, including music noise, mechanical and patron management, car parking and signage. It's recommended that a notice of decision to grant a planning permit be issued, subject to conditions that reduce the hours of operation from 6 p.m. until 11 p.m. Sunday to Thursday, reduce patron numbers to a maximum of 500 and require post-commencement acoustic testing to be undertaken to ensure compliance.
We have 20 people representing 33 objectors who have indicated they wish to speak this evening. First up, can I call Gary Johnson to come to the lectern and address the meeting? Now, Gary, just make sure that the microphone, there's a green light there, and then we can make sure we can hear you. So you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thanks for the opportunity to speak.
Is the microphone on? Is it a green light? Yeah. You might need to just have the microphone, if you can lift it up a bit closer to your mouth. Okay, it's all good. Try again.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. My name is Gary Johnson. My husband and I live just behind the development at 10 Castells Road. I have profound concerns regarding the proposed development. I fear it will not only disrupt, but potentially dismantle the fabric of our peaceful community. Consider our area today, a peaceful corner of Brunswick where we get to enjoy the tranquility of evenings and weekends. This is a very quiet residential area. The small number of businesses operating in the area are packed up by 5 p.m. and little disturbs the enjoyment of home life. Now envision the stark contrast this entertainment venue will bring, luring international acts and hosting hundreds of shows annually, literally over my back fence. This isn't mere change, it's an absolute reversal of our area's character and identity. The noise impact alone is enough to raise significant objections. The coming and going of cars, patrons' chatter, noise from machinery, and the venue itself all result in loss of amenity. The proposed plans for multiple acts each night of the week isn't just a minor inconvenience, it's a relentless and continuous assault on our peaceful existence. A nightly stream of noise reverberating through our once quiet streets, particularly my Castells Road. It's not just the increase in volume, it's the persistent, invasive nature of the noise that will shatter the quiet enjoyment of our homes. Traffic and parking issues compound the problem. Our streets, which today hold the gentle hum of residential life, will be overwhelmed with the influx of vehicles. The notion that these patrons will not flood our streets with cars, whether for parking or taxis, is fanciful at best. The developers are proposing to turn our quiet streets into their business's parking lot, a totally unacceptable and unfair burden on residents. The direct impact on my home life cannot be overstated. My house directly backs onto the proposed venue. The positioning of plant and machinery, such as air conditioning units and kitchen vents on the venue's roof, presents a direct threat to our quality of life. Imagine living with the constant drone of machinery and unrelenting odours from the kitchen infiltrating our homes, our gardens, a place where I like nothing more than to sit and read without distraction. This is a direct infringement on our right to enjoy our properties peacefully. I also want to touch upon the broader implications of this proposal. It's not just about the immediate inconveniences. What message are we sending about the kind of developments we allow in Merri-bek's residential areas? Are we really okay with prioritising commercial interests over the well-being of our community? This proposal goes way beyond a mere development. It's a radical alteration of our neighbourhood's character and identity. This entertainment venue, with its scale and nature, is profoundly mismatched with our residential area's quiet character. Colebrook Street is the wrong place for a venue like this. I urge you to consider the far-reaching impact of this development, reject the proposal to safeguard the character, amenity and future well-being of our community. Thank you for listening to our concerns.
Thank you, Gary. Next up, we have Drew Berzalkens. Drew, if you're in person, yeah, please make your way to the lectern.
Thank you, councillors. So I'm objecting to this proposal, and similar to what Gary has already mentioned. So my property is 30 metres from the proposed development, so I'm in very close proximity, and I have a young family which will be adversely impacted despite the conditions that the council officers are intending to impose. So one of the concerns that we have is the venue management plan will be insufficient to control patrons outside the venue. Consequently, we're still concerned that intoxicated or perhaps drug-affected patrons will invariably engage in loud and antisocial behaviour, potentially including yelling, urinating and damaging public property, including the laneways that surround the venue. My property overlooks the two immediate laneways with my windows above the top of 1 to 7 Colebrook Street to the south's external boundary wall. So my north side rooms will be subject to any and all of the noise from patrons using the alleyways for potentially loud and disruptive behaviour, negatively impacting on my family's sleep and health and other residents nearby. So looking at the management plan, it's unclear what action management will take if they receive reports of disruptive patron behaviours and what remedies affected nearby residents will be entitled to. The second point I'll talk about is just the venue itself. And so the development is required to ensure that sensitive residential uses are satisfactorily protected from unreasonable levels of live music and entertainment noise. And so we have seen the expert reports regarding the acoustic mitigation and the recommendation there'll be follow-up testing. It's still unclear from the council officer's report what interim action could be taken if the EPA noise limits were failed to ensure that residents do not continue to be disrupted by the venue while any modifications are being met to meet the EPA limits, or what action will be taken if the compliance cannot be achieved. For example, permanent installation of noise limiting devices or revocation of permits or licences. And just final comment that I'll be making is just around the plant that will be installed. Again, the council officer's report notes the mechanical plant and equipment has not yet been selected and reviewed by a qualified acoustic consultant, which needs to be engaged. And so I'm concerned that once the conditional development permit is granted, there may not be any opportunity for public consultation on the mechanical plant and equipment, and only subject to review and approval by council officers. So given the permanence of the plant and potential location very close to the residential properties, this would not be acceptable. Thank you.
Thank you, Drew. Next up, we have Leo Dimio. Leo, if you can make your way to the lectern.
Good evening, everybody. I'm speaking on behalf of my mother, Angelina, and myself. I have an interest in the area, and my mother is an 89-year-old person, limited mobility and health problems. She's been living at 26 Castles Road, residential zone 1, for over 60 years. This is the home where our family was raised. I urge councillors to consider humanitarian grounds as a contributing factor in its justification for rejecting the proposal. There are car spaces right in front of my mother's home, only a few metres from her bedroom. These parking spaces are easy walking distance to the venue and would be excellent parking options for the patrons of the proposed venue. It would follow then that at unreasonable hours, when she would be trying to sleep, there would be sudden breaking of the silence by noises of cars being unlocked, car doors closing, engines starting, people moving, talking, and more. This would wake her with a fright and disrupt her sleep. She is not in the greatest of health, and it would cause anxiety and stress. It will greatly affect her well-being. She is also worried about her neighbours. We are worried about her neighbours who have worked hard to create a safe and peaceful environment to live in. This is now under threat from what would be such a devastating intrusion into their lives. We are worried about the trauma, anxiety, and unacceptable hardships this development would bring, particularly for those families whose children or family members have complex needs. I'm sure you've heard and will hear the distress that this proposal is causing. I believe there is a duty of care on the decision makers to protect these people and their mental health. I ask that councillors vote on the side of compassion for the residents and consider humanitarian grounds as one of the reasons to reject this proposal. I thank you for listening.
Thank you. Next up, we have Esther Johnston.
Hello, my name is Esther Johnstone. I'm an owner of property in Castles Road, Brunswick. I understand the councillors don't receive a copy of our objection, so I'll take this opportunity of reading a summary of mine. Car parking, noise and traffic. The applicants seek to waive car parking spaces. I urge council not to grant this request. There is already a serious issue with car parking in and around the area that needs to be addressed. Many properties, including mine, do not have off-street parking, and residents are finding it extremely difficult and at times impossible to park in their own street. The proposed seeks to cater for up to 500 patrons, in addition to management staff and performers. Such a significant volume of people in one area will exasperate the current lack of street parking for the existing residents. Patrons will be searching and circling for any available car park before 6 p.m. At the same time, residents will be coming home from work. There will be an increase in traffic congestion in small residential streets that will cause angst and frustration. At the conclusion, hundreds of alcohol and drug-affected patrons will spill into the residential zones. Late at night and early hours in the morning, noise by patrons, cars, traffic and congestion will cause disturbance and severely impact residents' sleep, health and well-being. Safety and sale of consumption of liquor. I understand that the zoning of the land falls within Industrial 3 zone. I understand that Council needs to take into account that the proposed use does not affect the safety and amenity of the adjacent, more sensitive land uses. This proposal will affect the safety and amenity of the residential streets adjacent to it. Live music and entertainment venues will attract inappropriate and loudish behaviour. At all hours of the night, patrons will be walking to their cars and catching public transport drunk and drug affected. This will undoubtedly be disruptive and significant risk that drunk patrons will cause property damage, torment and frighten residents. Such venues also attract illegal activities and dangerous persons, including drug dealers, into the area. Residents will feel unsafe to walk in their own street and laneways should this application be successful. Residents and their children will avoid using Garong Park as it will likely become dirty and unsafe due to alcohol and drug use. Property value. Residents will be deterred to live so close to the proposed establishment. This application is detrimental to the general amenity of the neighbourhood and will adversely affect people wishing to rent or buy in our current quiet and peaceful, community-driven street. This will decrease property values. My conclusion, I urge Council to consider the devastating consequences of granting this application. Not only will residents be further denied car parking availability already so desperately scarce, but the venue will detrimentally impact the safety and amenity of nearby residents. I implore Council to refuse the application. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Belinda Felicissimo. Belinda.
Hi, my name's Belinda Felicissimo and I'm representing our family property at 8 Castles Road in Brunswick. So my parents have been at that property for 50 years and my mum is now 78, elderly, high needs. She is absolutely petrified of what this is going to bring to the area. I think for people that are very vulnerable and also high needs, I think you really need to take this into consideration. The fear that this is bringing through our community is just, well, it's inappropriate. It shouldn't be, I don't even know how this was even considered to be appropriate in our area, being residential, quiet residential area. The lack of parking in the area, others have mentioned as well, is an issue, always has been an issue. I don't know where you think 500 plus people are going to be able to park their cars. Car share, all of that is going to cause a lot of noise, a lot of disruption to the area in very early morning hours, 1 o'clock. That's just, people are sleeping at that time. There are young families, there are older residents. It's just not, shouldn't even be considered. The cleaning of the laneway, it's always been an issue. We live right on the laneway. Our house is probably 4 metres from where this proposed site is going to be. And there has always been issues with rubbish, bottles, dumped cars, whatever it may be. This will cause absolute chaos, just knowing that people will be urinating, vomiting, doing who knows what in the laneways is causing lots of fear amongst the community as well. Noise is a big issue. Our area has always been really peaceful and I think this is going to cause lots of issues, not only with the venue itself in terms of loud music, but also waste management. That's going to have to be done early mornings, early hours, I'm assuming. Bins that are taking bottles, dumping into trucks, that is going to be, there is no way people can sleep through that, and I don't know how that is even, yeah, anyway. Air conditioning, all those sorts of things. I mean, there are EPA rules around noise, and I don't know how that can pass with a venue in a residential area. A lot of the things like musical instruments, it says that after 10 p.m, Monday to Thursday, Friday till 11 p.m, Saturday, Sunday till 11 p.m. So I don't know how 1 a.m. is even permitted, given EPA standards and guidelines. Electrical equipment, another thing, 8 p.m. I can't see that a venue of that size will be turning off all their air conditioning, all the vents, all equipment that they use at 8 p.m. because of EPA rules. I don't think that's going to happen. I don't know how that would be permitted. House valuations, I think, is a really big issue as well. Residents have spent lots of money building, improving their homes, and this will definitely affect values of homes in the area. I know that if I was looking in the area, I would never buy a property so close to a music venue, and I'm sure that's going to be something that a lot of people will encounter. So I would love to know how council is going to compensate people for the drop in that sort of revenue that potentially people would be selling, buying, whatever.
Belinda, you've gone over your 3 minutes, so I might just ask you to come to a conclusion.
So, like others said, I think that the council really has a duty of care to vulnerable people, first of all, and I think you really need to reconsider this. It's just inappropriate, and I think it should be refused.
Thank you, Belinda.
Next up, we have Derek Jarman, who is online. So it might take a little while for Derek to appear on screen and connect to video and audio. Okay, we can see Derek, and Derek, can we hear you?
Yeah.
Great, go ahead, you've got 3 minutes. Derek, are you good to go ahead?
Yes.
Yep. Yeah, you have 3 minutes, the time started. Go ahead.
Thank you. Oh, hang on. Sorry, I've got...
You might need to mute, if wherever you're watching us on live stream, just mute that.
Yeah.
We've lost, he might have turned his camera off. Can you hear us, Derek? He's just dropped out. So while Derek reconnects, we might move on to the next person. So do we have Layla Taleb? Layla? She's coming? Great. Awesome. All right. Welcome, Layla. You'll have 3 minutes, and we'll have Derek after you.
Okay, let me read this. I'm a bit nervous.
You'll be all right.
Okay, I, Layla Taleb, reside at 14 Castles Road, Brunswick. We've been living there for over 55 years. I must begin by stating my absolute bewilderment at the audacity of the developer seeking exemption from providing parking for their anticipated hoard. This request is beyond ridiculous. For over a decade, we as a family have been relentlessly raising issues with council about parking. We call council on a weekly basis, sometimes 3 to 4 times a week. The proposed music hall is 4.5 metres from my home. I start work at 3 a.m, sometimes at 3:30 a.m. The music hall's operating hours from 6 p.m. to 1 a.m, 7 days a week, are nothing short of outrageous. What will become of our sleep? Where will I park after work? The sheer audacity of the project leaves me astounded and genuinely appalled. This entire project poses a serious threat to my mental health. I suffer from misophonia, a disorder that causes me to experience intense rage and panic attacks when exposed to loud music, exposed to loud sounds and including music. On weekends, my family gathers for barbecues and now we're expected to endure thunderous music right in our own backyard. This is not just ridiculous, it's incredibly frustrating. The stress and emotional turmoil this has caused me and my family are immeasurable. I am genuinely concerned that the council would even entertain the thought of this proposal. How can you consider this? Since receiving this letter in the mail on the evening of September 28, just hours before a 3-day public holiday, my anxiety and depression have worsened significantly. I've been unable to sleep and have been in terrible mood due to mental and emotional anguish this has caused. I implore you on behalf of my family and all local residents to firmly reject this proposal. The implications of this proposal are dire, and it's crucial that you consider the well-being and peace of long-standing residents like us in the face of such disruptive and inconsiderate development. Okay. I live with my mother, father, and my brother, and my parents are petrified of this. We can't even leave my mum at home alone like now, let alone when this nightclub, which I'll call it, and yeah, so they're petrified. They're really, really petrified. So yeah, the entire project, it's just a nightmare for us. This is just, yeah, it's just, yeah, we don't want it. The noise, the parking, sleep, work, everything. Sorry.
Thank you, Layla. Yeah. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
Sorry?
Is there anything further you wanted to add?
I'm just like, I just can't believe this is actually even considered. Like, how is this even considered? Like in residential, 4.5 meters from my home, in our backyard. Like, how is this even considered? What sleep will we get? The parking, I'm asking a genuine question. Like, this is like, you know, a nightmare.
Thank you, Layla. Yeah, you've gone over your 3 minutes.
Can't I have 3 more?
No, that's okay, thanks.
No? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Layla. We'll move on to Richard Burrows. Oh, sorry, do we have Derek? We have, yeah, so we'll go back to Derek Jarman, who's online. It might just take a few moments for Derek to enter the meeting, and yeah, here we go. Derek, can you hear me?
I can.
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead, your time starts now.
All right, thanks. Sorry about before, I closed the wrong window.
Okay.
I'm a former resident and current owner of a unit at 1 to 7 Colebrook Street. I may move back in the future, so in addition to my concerns for my former neighbours, I'm interested in protecting the livability of the area. To that end, I am deeply concerned by the proposal under discussion. The fundamental point that patrons will create noise in the area has already been made, and I believe it is uncontested. There are myriad reasons for residents to be concerned, but I'm going to talk about one in particular, the fact that patron noise can't be controlled once they leave the venue. The residents who chose to live in that neighbourhood understand they are near a light industrial zone, and therefore there will be some noise during the daytime while those businesses operate, but the area is predominantly residential. The proposed business is a different beast. It would operate late into the night, dispensing people, some inebriated, into the surrounding streets and alleys throughout the evening, with a large number exiting all at once. These people will add noise to the neighbourhood at times when residents are trying to sleep. And when a large number of people leave a licensed venue late at night, the idea that all will be quiet is laughable. Sure, a lot, possibly even a majority, will try to be quiet, but if we take an example of a night when there are, say, 250 patrons in attendance, and we choose a very high proportion, say 90%, that are perfectly behaved, that still leaves 25 people making noise that is likely to wake residents from their slumber and or disturb the quiet enjoyment of their premises. Note that I'm not even talking about the other unsociable activities that may take place in the extra traffic, just the noise from people talking loudly. Based on the planned operational times and days, that amounts to potentially 180 nights a year when some residents' rest is interrupted by someone coming out of this entirely unnecessary addition to the neighbourhood. Why should they have to endure that when there are so many other more appropriate places for such a venue to exist? Further, and I can't overstate the importance of this, the venue would have no control over these behaviours and the disturbances they create. Put another way, the problem would exist as a direct cause of the existence of the proposed business, but they will have no power to do anything about it, and neither will anyone else, because any disturbance will be transitory in nature. If a resident feels sufficiently aggrieved by the noise to report it to the police, the noisy party will have almost definitely moved on by the time it can be investigated. I've been a regular attendee at live music venues over the years and am supportive of them as an important element of the entertainment infrastructure of the city, but none that I have visited are in residential areas. And from first-hand experience, I can tell you that signs asking people to be quiet as they exit a venue are not 100% effective. In summary, the proposed business is entirely incompatible with the area, and once operational, the almost certain negative effects on the neighbourhood will be entirely outside the control of the residents, the venue, the council and the authorities. On that basis, I can't imagine anyone gathered would want to live within 20 metres of the business in question, and if the proposal is approved, and only someone living nowhere near the proposed business could possibly consider it appropriate. I hope the council recognises the problems this development would create and reject the application forthwith. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Derek. Next up, we have Richard Burrows. Richard, you might be here in person or you might be online. Do we have Richard online? Great, sorry, we have him online. So again, it might take a few moments for Richard to appear on screen. Richard, okay, you're just connecting to audio. If you have the live stream going on in the background, Richard, make sure you mute that. Richard, can you hear me?
Yes, I can. I've turned it off.
Awesome, great. We can hear you. You've got 3 minutes. We might just get the clock restarted and go ahead.
Thank you. So, members of the council, I'm deeply concerned as a property owner of Unit 9, 1 Colebrook Street, and urge you to carefully consider the significant negative impact of the proposed new venue on our neighbourhood. The development of a venue of this size in such close proximity to a residential zone is wholly inappropriate. The noise levels from the venue, with approximately 180 shows each year, pose a serious threat to the peace and tranquility of our community. The noise, congestion, and possible antisocial behaviour resulting from the arrival and departure of large numbers of patrons late at night will undoubtedly disrupt our quality of life and safety. Furthermore, the lack of parking provided by the venue is deeply concerning, as it will undoubtedly exacerbate the parking issues in our streets. The council's ignorance of its own rules regarding parking is particularly troubling, given the impact it will have on the residents who rely on the street parking. Council has an obligation to consider the impact of the proposed development on the amenity of the neighbourhood, as well as the need to adhere to parking regulations. I ask the council to reconsider the approval of the new nightclub in such close proximity to our residences. Please prioritise the welfare of our residents and the integrity of our neighbourhood. When I made the decision to invest in my property, it was with the understanding that the council had approved the conversion of the first grain store into a delightful residential building. This approval signified a commitment to preserving the peaceful and residential nature of the area. Now, the proposed approval of a second grain store next door as a nightclub music venue stands in direct conflict with these prior approvals. It undermines the trust and confidence that residents placed in the council's commitment to maintaining the character of the neighbourhood. It is imperative that the council remains consistent with its prior decisions and continues to prioritise the well-being and safety of the residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard. Next up we have Richard Hunton, who may be here in person. Richard, if you'd like to come to the lectern. Just make sure the green light's on the microphone. Thanks, Richard.
Okay, dear members of council, my name's Richard Hunton. I live at Unit 3, 17 Colebrook Street, which is a little over 30 metres from the edge of the proposed venue. I wish to voice my objections to this planned permit application. I'm all for live music venues in Brunswick, but not when they're opened in areas that are predominantly made up of pre-existing residential housing. It might not look like it from the planning application, but this venue is slap bang in the middle of a very residential area. It might be zoned industrial, but the property is bordered on 2 sides by residences that will be severely impacted by noise and a reduction in amenity during the venue operation and during patron arrival and exit. My objection is based on 3 main areas. Noise. Regardless of the venue's patron management plan, patrons leaving the venue either to park cars or to public transport are most likely to walk south, not north, along Colebrook Street. Quite a lot of these patrons will be heading to park cars on Tinning Street or Castles Road. Those heading to Castles Road are likely to take a shortcut through the laneway between 1 Colebrook and 9 Colebrook. If they are headed to public transport, they will head south to the Tinning Street rail crossing and then onto either Sydney Road or the Anstey Railway Station. They are unlikely to head north to Moreland Station, the public car park next to the tram depot, or Sydney Road, as this is an extra 300 to 400, maybe more, metres on foot. This will be especially the case during winter when it's bitterly cold and raining. As a result, there'll be a lot of noisy and drunk foot traffic at 11 or 1 on Colebrook Street, Tinning Street and Castles Road in areas that are normally very quiet at night. This will be especially bad on Colebrook Street where there is only one footpath. None of the existing residential properties near the venue have been built with soundproofing, designed for proximity to a live music venue. And this venue is particularly worrying, as you've heard, for residences along Castles Road due to the thin west wall of the venue, how close they are, and the exposed plant equipment that will be placed on the roof of the venue. Traffic. Due to the venue, there'll be a much larger amount of evening traffic on Colebrook and Tinning Street, especially during winter, when most patrons will drive their own cars or catch ride shares. When the venue closes at 11 or 1, this large amount of traffic on the two roads will severely affect our amenities, sleep and health for residents currently living on Colebrook and Tinning Streets. As well, due to the restricted traffic flows on one-way streets that the council has set up in this area, a lot of this traffic will also use Castles Road as a shortcut. Finally, car parking. Especially during winter, when public transport, scooters and bikes are not very popular, patrons will ride share or carpool to the venue. Patrons will try to park on Colebrook Street, but there will be substantial overflow into Tinning Street and Castles Road, stopping residents from parking close to their houses. The planning application mentions that patrons can use the public car park next to the tram depot on Sydney Road, but this is not visible from Colebrook Street and it's painful to get to and from the venue. So it is not likely to be used when local streets are way more convenient. So finally, this is a very inappropriate development for a property that has had a planning permit for offices and residential for many years prior to the current owners purchasing it, and it will have a severe impact on residents, many who have been here, as you heard, for decades.
Thank you. So next we have John Kazanis.
Hi everyone, and thanks for the opportunity to speak, and I'll try and keep it shorter than 3 minutes. So I live at 13 LaRose Street in Brunswick, so just north of Tinning Street. So I'm about 150 diagonal metres from the proposed venue, and I've lived in my townhouse for 23 and a half years, so coming up to 24 years. So I think I've got a reasonable sense of what's going on in Brunswick and perhaps what might be best for the area. The other thing that I do is I'm part of a complex of 30 townhouses, and those townhouses are at 64 to 72 Tinning Street and 80 Tinning Street, and I chair the committee of the residents. So the reason why we bought in this particular location, as you've been hearing from the other residents, is that it's very, very quiet. So you've got to ask yourself, well, why is that? Well, that's because Tinning Street is cut off from Sydney Road by the railway track. And the other thing is, when we all bought our properties in that area, we knew that it was an industrial precinct. But when you look at the businesses that are set up there at the moment, they operate only during business hours, and they tend to be warehouse-style businesses, all right? So they're not disruptive at all to the residents. Now, the ability of all residents to go into their home in the evenings and have a good night's sleep and not be disrupted by loud music, by people who are drunk and intoxicated, and noisy cars and doors being slammed, I think that's the right of every resident, not only in this particular location, but in any location that someone chooses to live. I think the issue that we have in our complex is really just the size and the proportion of this development. I think it's completely oversized. I know you're cutting it down from 800 to 500, but even 500, we're not talking about a microbrewery, a restaurant, or an eating venue. This is a live music venue that will be highly disruptive and out of proportion. We don't think is best in class in terms of urban planning for live music venues, and I think the council needs to consider that in terms of its live music venue strategy for the entire area. Venues like that probably belong in the other side of the railway track, closer to Sydney Road, not where it's highly residential. So it's not appropriate. And as you've been hearing from all of the residents, it's going to be highly disruptive. So thank you.
Next we have Jane O'Reilly. Jane O'Reilly. Is Jane here this evening? If Jane arrives, let us know. Next up we have Alexandra Bloom. Alexandra Blooms? Okay, all right, thank you. Then we have Alexandra Davies, who's speaking also on Jack Davies' behalf.
Hi, thank you. I acknowledge and agree with the previous objectors, and I will focus on impacts to my young family and the drafted Vibrant Brunswick Activity Centre document specifically around noise. I'm a resident of 1 to 7 Colebrook Street, a mother of 2 young children aged 1 and 4, and I speak on behalf of myself and my husband, Jack Davies. Within a kilometre radius of the proposed venue, there are at least 3 primary schools, 8 kindergartens, and 9 daycare centres. Majority of the daycare centres and kindergartens have lengthy wait lists, this proving this demographic is quite dense in the surrounding area. The unnamed laneway connecting Colebrook and Castles Road runs past our main bedroom. When a single car goes down here at night, it is incredibly disruptive as the light and sound rebound between the bluestones reflecting into our bedroom. A 2-person conversation can clearly be heard. The venue cannot control patrons using this laneway as they return to cars parked in residential zones, drive down the laneway in an attempt to avoid the inevitable traffic jams or utilise this to urinate before moving on or waiting for their ride share. Section 5.9.3 of the report are not effective techniques to contain sound and movement of any number of patrons, let alone the 500 predicted. Quiet zone signage will not be respected. The white noise created by patrons entering and leaving the venue en masse cannot be contained. Crowds will be congregated waiting for rideshare options. There is no way to avoid this as exhibited by comparable venues like the Corner Hotel. This laneway is also dark and secluded. It is not an isolated laneway of this description within the immediate vicinity. There is increased risk of predatory and antisocial behaviours and drug deals, of which there are already evidence of in our area. CCTV or increased lighting is not an option from the venue as they do not own any of the properties along this laneway and many other alike laneways in the surrounding streets. I will no longer feel safe coming home with my children after dark, confronted by masses of likely intoxicated and smoking patrons. Garrong Park Playground is frequented by my young family and many others. A small group of volunteers maintain this, providing a safe place for the community. Increased broken glass, littering, destruction of amenity, and potential evidence of drug use is expected in the park as people use this space to gather before or after music shows. This is unsafe for the volunteers and the community who frequent this space. Titting Street is already known to be a place of drug deals, and with the proposed venue, this will escalate. The evidence of the broken glass and littering and destruction is not only for the park, but our literal front doorstep along Colebrook Street. I would no longer feel comfortable allowing my children to walk and explore their own community due to increased risk of injury and disease. There is a vast difference between moving to a home in proximity to a music venue and having a music venue, particularly of this proportion, thrust upon you. The surrounding houses are not built to withstand the created sound. Noise that comes with a venue of this proportion and the associated exponential increase of both foot and road traffic overnight with mass entrance and exodus is not only disruptive to quality of sleep and leisure time, but drastically decreases the value of our home, our primary asset of which we are dependent on, and the quality of life of our young family. Moreover, the draft of the Vibrant Brunswick Activity Centre document, clause 3.10, states the following. If a new live music venue is proposed, it is required to keep live music noise within the venue. If new residential development is proposed within 50 metres of an existing venue, the apartments are required to be built to keep noise from live music out. There are many dwellings within 50 metres of the proposed venue, some are even within 4 metres. Clause 2.0 notes amenity objectives include to maintain amenity for residential uses within and adjacent to the activity centre by ensuring they are protected from unreasonable levels of noise and other land use amenity impacts. The venue proposal, even with the recommended decreased patronage and hours, still fails to meet the objectives outlined.
Alexandra, you've spoken over your 3 minutes, but if you're speaking on Jack's behalf, I'll give you a little bit extra time.
Beautiful, thank you. There has been no attempt at community consultation from the developers to date. The more I've learnt from this process, the more disheartened I've truly become. How can a proposal, particularly of such a large proportion, even be considered based on a proposed activity zone which has not been passed yet? And even if passed, the application fails to meet various objectives within that. I wholeheartedly object to this proposal. It will severely impact our families' mental health, well-being, and force us to relocate away from Merri-bek community, where we'd hope to raise our children in. Our children will undeniably be uprooted from their friendships, education, and community in such formative years. Financially, we would not be able to obtain a similar residence within the Merri-bek Council region. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up, we have Tracy Spiel speaking on behalf of Analia Solis. Thank you, Tracy.
Hello. My understanding is that I've been given 6 minutes because I'm speaking on behalf of somebody else.
So you've got 3 minutes, and then you can speak another 3 minutes to the points for Analia.
Oh, that was not what I was told. Okay. I'd like to acknowledge and agree with all that has been said and will be communicated to council members tonight by my community in objecting to this proposal. My name's Tracy and I live at 1 to 7 Colebrook Street. I'm speaking as a community member reflecting the concerns of our neighbourhood who are objecting to this planning proposal on safety and security concerns specifically. Whilst I'm an avid believer in the importance of spaces for art, culture and community gathering, I do not believe that the proposal is going to meet the needs of the community in a way that considers the local infrastructure, community and residents. I'll be all for an intimate venue that promotes social engagement and interaction. However, the 500 patron on-trade venue does not read as an intimate community-aware proposal. An establishment of this size is likely to attract a large number of people from all over Greater Melbourne. This and the serving of alcohol will increase violent crime, including sexual assault within the neighbourhood. Studies have identified an association between the proximity to outlets selling alcohol and violent crime. I've got those references here. There's too many to go through now. The likelihood of assault increases with more people and at on-trade outlets such as bars and nightclubs where alcohol is purchased. Evidence suggests that bars and clubs are likely to provoke violence because these spaces are characterised by heavy and frequent drinking, loose social norms, large crowds and loud music. These risky characteristics may characterise a premises as more permissive to violence and therefore attract a clientele who are at risk of perpetrating violence. This is known as the assortative drinking theory. Have the developers and council examined the evidence of these studies? This 500 patron venue is termed intimate in the planning documents. It's an outrageous misnomer. This misuse of that word seeks to mask the inevitable increase in assaults that will occur because of a very large number of people will be arriving for a night of revelry and leave late at night, in many cases in drug and alcohol affected states. Patrons will use the laneways past my bedroom window with the usual antisocial behaviours associated with excessive drinking. It is inconceivable that this venue will not increase the incidence of common assault, property damage and sexual assault. The infrastructure and facilities surrounding the venue are generally dark and isolated spaces. The planning application is seeking permission to reduce car parking obligations to zero. The reliance on public transport and ride share is manifestly inadequate, even with weeknights possibly ending at 11 p.m. Weekends will be a worse nightmare at 1 a.m. There are already drug deals done in and around our community. We must not allow even more due to the inappropriate use of this space as a nightclub. Needles and pill packets wind up in these dark and isolated spaces, testifying to the use of illicit drugs, many of which are known to increase antisocial behaviour at best and violent assault at its worst. People have spoken about security cameras outside of the nightclub. There are a number of issues about installing security cameras. As previously stated, they don't own the walls on which some of these cameras will need to be installed. Secondly, there is a concomitant loss of privacy for our community going about their normal lives. Finally, CCTV footage evidence must be kept for a minimum of 28 days. Many assault victims will not report to police for longer than 28 days. I might be cynical, but I believe venues would hold such evidence for the mandated minimum required only. This nightclub will attract all sorts of people from far and wide, both reasonable and respectful, as well as the polar opposite. I believe my quiet enjoyment of my home will be severely disrupted as my home backs onto both laneways, meaning my bedroom is within 5 metres of access to the venue. I believe this proposed development will impact my safety and security by its very nature and size. I found the application to be manifestly inadequate and actually dismissive of safety and security of patrons, community members and staff. There are times when other staff will be used as security, security staff will not be available. The occupational health and safety implications for staff are significant. Security staff themselves can be the instigators of confrontation. The fact that security staff currently in Victoria can be on security door duty after 3 weeks of training fills me with dread. As an experienced workplace health and safety representative for over 30 years, one of the glaring omissions from the venue management plan is the complete absence of risk assessments in relation to safety and security. The research papers, which I would have cited tonight with time, but I can leave them with you, have been a good starting point for an informed suite of risk assessments covering many of our community's concerns. Instead, what we got was a rose-coloured glasses, half-baked snow job. The complaints procedure is also a joke. It is a bare minimum approach to health and safety. I ask the Council to reject this planning application as it will adversely impact my enjoyment of my home, as it will for a significant number of community members. My feeling of safety and security will be diminished substantially, and the noise and antisocial behaviour that will occur right outside my windows will be intolerable. Thank you.
Next we have Nicole Dan Elzen, who is also speaking on behalf of Mario Di Mio.
Good evening, councillors. Thank you for the opportunity to speak. As the Mayor mentioned, I also speak on behalf of Mario Di Mio, whose elderly mother, Angelina, has lived on Castles Road since 1962. I acknowledge all the issues raised by the speakers before me. Tonight, I will specifically focus on the negative impact of the proposed venue on traffic and car parking, and particular focus on issues with the transport impact assessment included in this application. This proposed music venue not only plans to provide absolutely no car parking spaces for any of the staff or 500 patrons, contravening requirements in the Merri-bek planning scheme, it plans to reduce car parking spaces on Colebrook Street, reallocating current public car spaces used by other businesses and residences in the area for their own use as a rideshare drop-off zone, something that was not mentioned in the council officer's report. So not only are there going to be no car parking spaces, they're going to reduce public car spaces that are currently there and used by the businesses there. The estimated number of patron car parks required in the applicant's transport impact assessment is also based on wildly unrealistic assumptions and outdated data from a parking survey that is more than 18 months old, when we were still in the aftermath of COVID lockdowns. The council's development engineer even states that the applicant's car parking estimates are an underestimate, and the local community is in furious agreement with them. The developers assume that most patrons will take public transport to and from the venue. However, after midnight, trains only run hourly on Friday and Saturday, and not at all on other nights. So on Friday night, miss the 1:10 a.m. train, and you're waiting until 2:10 a.m. for the next one. The options are also irregular at this time for trams. Therefore, as much as we, particularly the local residents, want patrons to take public transport, a large proportion of the 500 patrons are expected to drive and rideshare. And there is no doubt about it, as other people have discussed tonight, those that drive will park in the neighbouring residential streets, a very short walk from the venue and with no parking restrictions after 6 p.m. not Sydney Road, which is very busy at 6 to 7 p.m, and a 700-metre drive from the venue. And the council car park that the proposal relies on for most of its wildly unrealistic car parking requirements, you can't even see it from the venue. The venue has no control over it. It is actually quite busy these days at night time, and who knows how this demand will increase from venues on Sydney Road in the future. The venue has no control over this car park whatsoever, and it was the primary car parking it used in its assessment. So this venue would literally attract hundreds of cars from suburbs across Melbourne into the quiet suburban streets near Colebrook Street. At 6 to 7 p.m, these cars would compete with residents returning from work for street parks, which are already at a premium. And if we want to have visitors over for dinner, forget it. And which way will the majority of patrons have to go to get to their car parks on nearby residential streets, including car parks in the proposal's transport impact assessment? South, not north, as they then contradict themselves and say they're going to move people to, even though the car parks they talk about, you have to go south to get to them. Past 1 to 7 Colebrook Street, past homes on Tinning Street, and past homes on Castles Road and Rope Walk. As I said, a key management control measure that the developers rely on is encouraging patrons walk north from residential homes, away from residential homes to the south and west of the venue. But this is also away from patrons' cars, the closest railway station and the closest tram stop. It's ludicrous and it just will not happen. More concerning is that these cars would leave en masse at 11 p.m. on weekdays and 1 a.m. on Friday and Saturday when music shows finish. The neighbouring streets, including dead-end streets, one-way streets, very narrow streets, particularly La Rose Street, where people are constantly getting their rearview mirrors knocked off, single-lane traffic calming sections on Tinning Street where only one car can go, it's not two-way, and cobblestone laneways. These are not made for hundreds and hundreds of cars leaving at the same time. If the developers had ever driven in this quiet pocket of Brunswick, they would see that this venue would result in large queues of cars in the early hours of the morning, affecting my and other residents' ability to sleep. There is also the increased damage to parked cars due to the narrow streets, including, I should add, the north area of Colebrook Street, where people are coming in, where you can barely accommodate 2 cars passing each other when there is a car parked on that street. This is already an issue with Albion Street and La Rose Street, which is going to be another major access point from the south into this area. The council report suggests that, quote, Colebrook Street will absorb the majority of traffic movements given its direct access to Moreland Road and Tinning Street in the south. But you can't do a U-turn on Colebrook Street to exit back onto Moreland Road, especially when there's cars parked on there. It would be a 3 or 5 point turn at best. And then there's also all this traffic that's coming, so it's not possible. So when cars are driving down the street, there is no room or opportunity for this. So cars will need to continue down Colebrook Street, along Tinning Street, and then exit to Moreland Road via Castles Road, with its speed humps, past around 100 residences, or go west along Tinning Street
Thank you,
through a
Nicole.
one-lane
You've had
traffic
6
lane.
minutes on behalf of both you and Mario.
Okay. Okay, thank you very much. I ask that you consider the negative impacts on the peacefulness, livability and amenity of this area for the residents. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. Next up, we have Maureen Campbell speaking on behalf of herself and John Varallo. Sorry, Maureen. Do we have Maureen here? Yes. So for people speaking on behalf of multiple people, I'll allow up to 6 minutes, which is 2 people's allocation time. In the interest of time, given we have a large number of people hoping to speak tonight, and we want to make sure a decision is made tonight. So Maureen, on behalf of you and John, you have 6 minutes.
Thank you. Can you hear me? Can people hear me from behind? It's a little tricky behind if people are a little short. So thank you for the opportunity to speak. Maureen Campbell's my name and I live at 42 Tinning Street. I'm also speaking on behalf of John Varallo of Castles Road and Colebrook Street. John has a property next door to the development. He resides 30 metres from the proposed development and he has long-standing residential tenants less than 20 metres from the development. My husband and I's bedroom is 60 metres from the development. Between John, my husband and I, we have in total 75 years within the community. I agree and acknowledge the objectives that have been raised by earlier speakers. I will be speaking predominantly in this time slot at the loss of the amenity and how this will impact on our wonderful community and also the significant physical and mental health implications of the proposal. We have an incredibly vibrant community, a community of psychologists, doctors, anaesthetists, scientists, carers of ageing parents, generally the very valued elderly residents of the area, and of course our young families and many others, and many who have attended tonight. There are two areas I wish to highlight where I believe a venue of this proposed size of 500 patrons, so close to residents and so close to our wonderful Gurrong Park, will have an enormous negative impact. I have actively coordinated the Gurrong Park community for over 3 years and been actively involved in the development of that park. For those unfamiliar, that is 150 metres as the crow flies from this venue, from the proposed venue. And thank you, Merri-bek Council, for our fabulous park close to home. The local community absolutely appreciates it. With over 44 families on our community group, we have a vibrant network of community members. This is our community. We dedicate a minimum of 6 hours a week to maintain this valuable resource of Gurrong Park for the benefit of the whole community. We have a significant number of families using the park from early morning until evening. And if you had the pleasure of attending some of the milestone birthday parties, you'd see how wonderful this park is. Our effort to maintain this vibrant resource includes removing daily signs of drug use, of sexual activity in the park, unfortunate alcohol-fueled problem behaviours, and of course littering and graffiti. So we do that every day as a community group. Every morning we're out there doing that. We have a smaller WhatsApp group who've worked closely with the police to engage them when we have significant behaviours that have got out of hand, and that's predominantly the houses right around the park. 500 patrons to this proposed venue descending at one time into the area and our surrounding streets and the park before and after music events has a potential to destroy what we have so diligently worked towards, and the developers will have no control over this. As a recently retired public servant of 25 years and the last 15 years in the Education Department working in the early years space, my role has included at many points our relationship with Merri-bek Council. I had the oversight of the maternal and child health programs, kindergarten programs, and I can tell you from my experience, this community has gentrified, it has changed, it is many, many young families of who you can see here tonight, and that is our community, not the community that's referred to within the application. This is a completely different community. This is young families moving in, appreciating what we have, using all the resources. So I also am on board member of the Northern Schools Early Years Management Cluster, and we've worked tirelessly as board members to ensure that Merri-bek, from the Moreland Kindergarten right up to Glenroy Hub, get the infrastructure they need because it's growing families, and that is our community. The developers do not understand our community, and if they did, they wouldn't even contend to put a 500-patron venue 7 nights a week into our area. As a psychologist, I'm very aware of the importance to everyone's health and well-being, the unbroken sleep, what a significant difference that's going to make. And as each of the individuals has spoken, the impact on people's mental health is significant. The application has had a huge impact. The venue and all its inconsistencies has a potential to damage a significant proportion of the well-being of our community, and we've worked tirelessly to build it, and it is truly a community. So I ask the councillors, whose well-being do you value? An investor who parachutes themselves into our community with no regard for the negative implications, opening a 500-patron venue less than 20 metres from people's beds, or our very valued residents who work, shop, play and enjoy our wonderful Brunswick, who plough large amounts of resources and funds, goodwill and care into our community. This is the community of residents who make up this area of Merri-bek, and who also support the much wider well-being of our state as health workers, as care workers, all sorts of industry. I ask Merri-bek councillors, please assist the developers to find a more suitable venue for their passion project. This area does not fit with this proposal. Consider your values. Do you support the range of professionals who care for our community, our state, or do your values align with investment bankers and developers who parachute themselves into this area without even taking the time to understand our community? Thank you.
Maureen. Next up, we have Pauline Swain, who's also speaking on behalf of Sahar Mustafa.
Good evening, Mayor Pulford and councillors. My name is Pauline Swain and I'm a retired teacher and I live with my husband in one of the 22 townhouses at 1 to 7 Colebrook Street. I also speak tonight on behalf of Sahar Mustafa of Castles Road. This evening, I will focus on issues with the proposed venues management plan and its inability to overcome the negative impact of this venue on local residents, including myself and Sahar. The management plan is full of contradictions, critical omissions, and a clear lack of knowledge in this area of Brunswick. I also question the ability of the venue to meet the new venue management requirements in the council officer's report. Council officers have stipulated that patrons will require a ticket to enter the venue. So clearly, there will be substantial queuing to the north of the venue for hundreds of metres, blocking resident access to the only footpath on Colebrook Street. The management plan also proposes virtual queuing, which will result in patrons loitering outside nearby residences and in Garong Park, where they wait to get into the venue. The plan says that patrons will smoke in an area north of the venue entrance. Well, that can't be on the narrow footpath of Colebrook Street, as that's where the queue to the venue will be. So, presumably, this will be on other businesses' private land, as there is literally nowhere else to go. I question the legality, let alone the social responsibility, of directing large groups of people to smoke on the footpath and in front of other people's premises. Also, because smoking will not be on the venue's premises, I question whether the venue can legally control it. And where will the musicians, the musos, smoke? Surely not with patrons. Will it be in the laneways to the west and south of the venue, right next to people's homes? Undoubtedly. Similarly, it is unrealistic to suggest that staff will direct 500 patrons to the north of the venue as they leave en masse after a concert, away from the closest number 19 tram stop, away from the closest railway station, and away from the majority of street parking on the residential streets. This also contradicts the applicant's transport assessment, which includes street parking south of the venue, and other parts of the application which indicates that patrons will be directed to Anstey Station, which is south of the venue. I also question the venue's legal authority to tell people where they can walk in a public space once off the premises, and the legal authority of staff to, quote, encourage patrons not to congregate in front of 1 to 7 Colebrook Street. Will I have security staff walking in front of my home all night, moving people along? Are they going to question my being there if I come in late? And is that the type of neighbourhood you would want to live in? And do you really think that the quiet zone signage is going to stop 500 patrons talking and laughing as they walk to their car or public transport post-concert? I don't think so. And the venue is meant to be close at 11 p.m. or 1 a.m, but hidden in the management plan is a 30-minute grace period. So that is really an 11:30 p.m. and a 1:30 a.m. closing time. And how do bands bump in and out? Presumably, bump out will be happening long after closing time from 1 a.m. in the morning, and it goes on and on. You do have to wonder whether the people who prepared this management plan have actually visited the site. Certainly, I have no confidence that it is adequate for the management of 500 patrons. the council officer's report indicates that off-site amenity impacts can be managed, but then concedes that in fact patron behaviour, including noise, outside the venue can be, quote, unpredictable and more difficult to control, and that reliance on modelling has limitations, particularly given residential properties are nearby. The officer's report also raises concerns at the late night hours until 1 a.m. daily, and a patron number of 875 in the original application could, quote, impact on the surrounding area, including noise from vehicle movements and collections, conversations and antisocial behaviour, and that the worst case scenario must be considered. Do councillors really think that having 500 patrons instead of 875 walking past residents' home at 11 p.m. or 1 a.m. any night of the week really mitigates this negative impact on our amenity? I believe it to be a likely scenario, not just a worst case scenario, that this nightclub will irrevocably damage the fabric of my neighbourhood and its peacefulness and family-friendly nature to the detriment of my and other residents' well-being. I respectfully ask the councillors to reject the application. Thank you.
Thank you. So next up we have Dean Allwright speaking on behalf of himself, James Huang, Nathaniel Swain and Ben Caligari. But Dean, I'll just let you know I'll allow 6 minutes in total rather than 12.
Thank you, Councillor. And I might ask back, given the amount of time I've invested in preparing and what I have to say, if you could make an assessment at 6 minutes if you'd like to hear the rest of my submission. I know that I've got pretty broad support out here for me to do that.
Sure, we do have a number of people.
Ben Caligari. We live at 50 Tinning Street, approximately 120...
I'll note your time's begun, yeah.
Yep, 120 metres to the southwest of the southwest corner of the site, and also representing Nathaniel and James. We accept a balancing exercise is required, and we accept that that's the role of the councillors, but we also point out that it needs to be done on the basis of complete and reliable information, and that tonight the councillors don't have that, and nor did, with all due respect, the council officers. The supposedly supporting information is incomplete, it's inconsistent, it's unreliable. You saw that in relation to a deep dive on the management plan. I submit it's every part of the application suffers from similar flaws. There's no analysis of claimed economic benefits. There's no traffic modelling. There's no meaningful analysis of the likely use of various modes of transport. Critically, either private vehicles, they seem to leverage some sort of assumption on the basis of the parking requirements, which they then proceed to ignore, or alternative methods, such as rideshare or bicycles. I find it interesting that they can completely ignore the requirement for parking and say people are going to use alternative methods of transport. We're providing 2 bike parks for 20 staff and 4 bike parks for 500 or 900 patrons. And that's appropriate because that's more than the plan requires. So no compensation for the lack of parking in a meaningful way for cycling. Cyclists will inevitably look for somewhere to lock their bikes. It'll be a pole, it'll be a fence, it'll be a tree, it'll be anywhere that's secure, and that will be not the 4 bike parks that are being proposed in front of the venue, which will quickly reach capacity. There's no substantive analysis of the impact of traffic flows or parking on Castles Road. There's no analysis of the intersection with Moreland Road, where I sat for 2.5 minutes this evening, 1 car, 2.5 minutes trying to cross. I don't know what that will look like with significant rideshare all leaving the venue at the same time. There's also no substantive analysis of how the reduced patron numbers or the reduced hours of operation will impact meaningfully on the adverse amenity impacts. In the interest of time, I can't actually go into all of those shortcomings, though I do note that we sought on the evening of the 21st of November to clarify these matters with the applicants, and they either largely refused to do so or passed the buck back to council, who had the application and were required to process it. Interestingly, they sought to assure us on the basis that they have much experience in the operation of other music venues. However, interestingly, they were not prepared to disclose which those venues were. I submit that a reasonable inference from that is that if they were to disclose the venues, even best case, first-class management, which they claim they will be implementing on this site, they aren't able to reduce the adverse amenity impacts and the complaints to a level that we could subject them to scrutiny tonight in a way that wouldn't jeopardise their application. Nor do I agree with the officer that the suggested conditions will mean the adverse amenity impacts on local residents in particular are acceptable. While the officer's report acknowledges that the worst case scenario must be considered, and the officer has, in a subsequent conversation, acknowledged that under the conditions, a worst case scenario could be, for example, two music events on 365 days of the year. The officer's answer to that, it's not going to happen. The conditions don't prevent it, and the application contemplates it. The officer's report places too much reliance on an application that consistently and repeatedly relies on the best case scenarios in the sense of those most favourable to the applicant. Importantly, firstly, the report doesn't sufficiently interrogate or challenge critical aspects of the application, including in particular in relation to traffic, parking and noise, nor does it, as I've mentioned, explain what the impact on the reduced patron numbers and reduced hours of operation exactly will be. Secondly, it doesn't answer those aspects of the peer review, and I am going to do a deep dive on noise because it's very technical and I have done my best to interpret it, and I think I can highlight that there are real shortcomings in the analysis of the acoustic report. The acoustic report that was peer reviewed and which indicates numerous deficiencies, which contrary to the applicant's claims, that is the peer review identified numerous deficiencies, and they have still not been adequately addressed, and certainly not in the context of, firstly, insufficient information to peer review the critical sound model. They couldn't actually review the sound model that the applicant used to prepare the acoustic report because they weren't provided with enough detail. Secondly, none of the additional background noise measurements have been undertaken. Those additional noise measurements, background noise measurements, were recommended by the peer reviewer because they were, quote, not fully satisfied with the background noise data, unquote. Peer reviewer highlighting problems and concerns with background noise measurements, requesting that further background noise measurements be undertaken. And those background noise measurements are absolutely critical.
So, Dean, I'll just note the timer's actually frozen, so we just have to reset the screen, but I'll give you I'll give you 1 more minute because it's been frozen for some time now.
Thank you, Councillor Bolton.
I believe we don't have. I believe we don't have quorum at the moment, so we're going to have to adjourn the meeting. But they're frozen. They're frozen. They're not actually on screen. So sorry, Dean, to interrupt your speaking time.
Can you hear me there?
Yeah, we can hear you, and we can hear Dean, even though he's frozen. I'm sorry, Dean.
Yeah.
I can see Angelica, but I can hear everything else. We can't see anything else, so we can't see the chamber.
Thank you, Councillor Pavlidis. I'm just going to work out. We can see you, which is a requirement for. Well, we can see a previous version of you, which is a. But seeing you is a requirement of quorum, so I'm just going to check governance on that.
Thanks.
Yes, it is.
Right. So we can, you are live on governance's screen. So he's turning the monitor around, which means we can see you. So I just want to avoid any technicalities of. So I think we'll have to restart the screens. Now, Councillor Bolton, you're about to move a motion. Okay. Do you have a seconder? Okay. We'll just put that.
Sorry, we couldn't hear that motion.
Sorry. Put your microphone on. So,
I just want to move a motion for an extension of speaking time for the resident Dean who's before us. 3 minutes.
Thank you, Sue. Do you have a seconder?
Me.
All right, Councillor Hart to second. All those in favour?
My hand's up.
Wait, can you see us if we're
Yes,
voting?
we can see you.
Sorry.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, okay. All right, that's unanimous, but so it'll be 3 minutes. Go ahead, Dean, and I might just put a timer on my phone given we can't see the...
Okay, so a peer review identified many things that haven't been addressed. It highlights, notwithstanding all the applicant-capable shortcomings, a risk of non-compliance and several aspects of marginal compliance, i.e. noise levels equal to the limit. We're right on the limit, lots of assumptions, and we have very real concerns about the ability to mitigate the noise appropriately. There's no express requirement for music equipment brought to the premises by performers to be subject to the noise-limiting equipment which the peer reviewers suggested should be installed. Critically, there are 3 elements of noise. There's no maximum noise limit in the application. It's indicative only, and it's one of those many things, many critical components, which is to be determined in consultation with the applicant and their advisors, with none of us represented in that process. Way too much of this is left for that process, or to be determined, or based on the conditions, some of which are so vague as to be unenforceable. The great one is in relation to noise. Suggested condition 9, noting that maximum noise is only indicative and needs to be untaken. The officer's suggested approach to maximum noise measurements is that testing by the applicant be undertaken at a busy period with a live music event at over 50% patron capacity. I predict that will be a cabaret performance. It'll be 51% of the 500%, and it certainly won't be a rave. The other aspect is patron noise, which has already been spoken to somewhat. Patron noise is not a requirement of the standard. The applicant has done its best with the kind of what they think is a practical approach, but it's not part of the standard. So requiring adherence to the standard won't require them necessarily to address patron noise, even if you accept the approach which they've taken, which is based on noise measurements at 8 metres in the laneway, not proximate to the residences on the laneway, 8 metres. I don't know why the sound measurements that were taken at that number 2 point, which is at the back of the proposed site, were undertaken at 8 metres. But they have, for example, picked up the train noise. There's a real risk that they are presenting higher background levels, which are critical to assessment of compliance with the noise standards, than are actually the case. Unreliable. More measurements required. In any event, if we accept that it was all tickety-boo, somehow those measurements at 8 metres get translated to measurements at the facade of a sensitive noise use, a house, and even then there's a 27 to 14.7% increase from the reported background level of noise. Finally, in relation to noise, there's no assessment of the cumulative effect of undetermined plant operating at maximum capacity on a hot summer's evening when the venue is at capacity, smokers are moving in and out.
Thank you, Dean. Your extra 3 minutes are up, so I'll ask you to finish talking. Thank you for your contribution. So we're going to have to adjourn for 10 minutes as our live stream is frozen, which obviously affects the public, from my understanding, can hear the conversation but can't see what's going on. So we're going to have to adjourn our meeting as we reset our systems, including our live stream, to enable people to properly participate in this meeting. As you know, so Dean, you may return to your seat, thank you. As you know, there are people tuning in online who are listening and following along, and they deserve to be able to follow along properly. So I need someone to move an adjournment. Yeah, so Councillor Riley to move and Councillor Bolton to second. So we'll try and come back sooner. We're just giving 10 minutes. Oh, sorry, we all have to vote on it? Yep. So everyone in favour? Yep. I can see the 2 at home on that screen. That's unanimous. So we're going to adjourn at 7:59. We'll be back at 8:09, hopefully, if we can get our systems working. Thank you, everyone. Sorry for this.